My name is Marcy Berger, and I'm the Member Services Coordinator here at AFSA. Welcome to What is EAT and Why Does It Matter for Financial Companies, presented by David Funsten and Lily Ray. This presentation is a part of AFSA's Business Partner webinar series, which allows industry experts to share timely educational topics directly with AFSA members. The webinars are designed to provide information that allow AFSA members to more effectively design, develop, and implement strategies for their company's success. For more information about the series or how to become a presenter, feel free to reach out to me following today's presentation. A few housekeeping notes. To ask a question, use the question box on the side of your screen. I'll read them aloud to all following the presentation. The slides and recording of today's webinar will be available later today on the webinar resource center. Finally, you'll receive a survey after the webinar is over. Please take a moment to complete it. Your responses help us fine-tune the program. A bit about our presenters. David Funsten has been creating and implementing prospecting customer lending marketing programs for over 20 years. As the Vice President of Strategy at SourceLink, David is responsible for creating integrated marketing plans for our financial clients. Before joining SourceLink, David has held senior marketing positions at Hardy Hanks, Gold Financial, Merkle, and Fusion Marketing Group. He holds a BS degree in Business Administration from University of Southern California, earned an MBA from Loyola Marymount University, graduating with honors, and a certificate in Digital Media Management from Georgetown University. Lily Ray is the SEO Director at Path Interactive, where she provides strategic leadership for the agency's SEO client programs. Born into a family of software engineers, web developers, and technical writers, Lily brings a strong technical background, performance-driven habits, and forward-thinking creativity to all programs she oversees. Lily began her SEO career in 2010 in a fast-paced startup environment and moved quickly into the agency world, where she helped grow and establish an award-winning SEO department that delivered high-impact work for a fast-growing list of notable clients, including Fortune 500 companies. Lily has worked across a variety of verticals with a focus on retail, e-commerce, B2B, and CBG sites. She loves diving into algorithm updates, assessing quality issues, and solving technical SEO mysteries. In 2017, Lily was nominated by Search Engine Land for Female Search Marketer of the Year, and she continues to provide SEO thought leadership and industry updates through contributions to digital marketing, publications, and speaking engagements. Take it away, Lily and David.
Hi there. Thank you so much. I'm Dave Funsten, and so before we get into the webinar, just a little bit about SourceLink, which is a company that both Lily and I belong to. SourceLink is a full-service performance agency providing results-driven marketing solutions. In December of this year, Path Interactive joined SourceLink to offer our clients a more complete suite of services to address their marketing needs. The information in this webinar is based upon our normative and best practice information. We use this information to bring cutting-edge strategies for our clients. And now, just kind of getting into the Could someone please advance the slide, please? Thank you. So the first question is, why bother? I mean, why bother with the with these Google recent updates? And there's really four main reasons why finance companies should, really focus on this and really understand what's going on. First off, a lot of our consumers, a lot of your customers are migrating to the web on their phones to start their research to look for loans. As millennials continue to increase their use of credit, this trend will only accelerate. Then when you think about your own website, the majority of incoming traffic is coming from organic search, probably over half. In other words, while people are using Google and Bing to find your company and also research, different types of loans. For the third time in 2019, Google has published in September a Google update to its core algorithm. This Google update covers all markets and search indexes, as it includes alterations to the core Google ranking algorithms, which is really important for when people search for your company. This also influences the ranking of your particular web pages within your website. And then finally, if we kind of do some dissecting of these guidelines give us a hint of what's going to happen next year. So if we understand sort of the nuances and the patterns of what's happening and what they think, where they're headed towards for next year, this gives us a better idea as far as what to plan for. And so with that, if someone could advance it, or Lily, if you could advance it, let's take it over, Lily, and get into what is EAT.
Excellent. Sounds good. Alrighty. So EAT, or EAT, is an acronym that Google created in its search quality guidelines, which stands for Expertise, Authoritativeness, and Trustworthiness. So if you look through Google search quality guidelines, which is a document that's intended to kind of let searchers know and Google's human evaluators know how they should measure what it means to have good quality content and trustworthy content, you'll notice that the acronym EAT appears about 100+ times throughout the document. And so what they're looking for is the expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness of the creator of the main content on a particular website, the main content itself, and the website. So we'll get into what that means. Another acronym that they focus on in their guidelines is what's called YMYL, Your Money, Your Life. So these are websites and pages that can impact the future happiness, health, financial stability, or safety of users. So Google basically classifies a certain section of the internet as YMYL, and obviously financial websites fall into that category because it's extra important that these websites have good EAT, that they can be trusted, that the people who are creating content on those websites have a good reputation. There hasn't been any evidence of fraud or misinformation or anything along those lines. So a lot of the recent algorithm updates have tied back into Google's kind of new emphasis on EAT for YMYL websites. So if we look at how this actually looks in the wild, there's been a lot of movement in terms of Google's algorithm updates as it relates to organic traffic patterns and how much traffic companies are getting from Google. So in this example, this is a wellness website where you'll notice these 4 dates that are called out on the right. These are core algorithm updates. And you'll see during the August 1st update, which was a very big update last year, they lost a lot of their traffic, gained it back in March, and then lost it again during a June core update as Google kind of recalibrates what it means to have good EAT. So next we have an alcohol website, which is another YMYL category. You can see that it benefited throughout last year in terms of the core algorithm updates, but then the June update happened this year and they lost a lot of that organic traffic. We also see for health, this is definitely a vertical that's been hit pretty hard by algorithm updates. You'll notice this women's health website saw a lot of growth last year. But then beginning in March of this year and then later in June, they lost a lot of that organic visibility. So basically, Google is just kind of recalibrating and changing in their algorithm to try to reflect the best possible EAT and the best possible, most trustworthy YMYL content. Lastly, we have Wall Street Mojo, so a financial website, and they're doing things well. As you can see, so far with the core algorithm updates that have happened in the last 2 years, they've actually benefited from each one. So this is a good website to look at to see what it means to have good EAT in the financial category. So what's going on and why are we seeing all these fluctuations on Google? So a little bit of backstory, and you all might be familiar with this, but Google's been in the news quite a bit, along with the other kind of tech giants. So there's a lot of questions around what type of content is Google putting out there? How trustworthy is it? What's going on with fake news and when cancer meets the internet? There's obviously investigations going on. So Google's currently being investigated by the FTC in the United States. There's been a lot of controversy with the EU. So these algorithm updates, from my perspective and the perspective of the SEO community, are a way for Google to try to make sure that it's only putting out high quality, trustworthy content, and it kind of piggybacks off of a larger fight against misinformation that they've been working towards over the last several years. So again, search engines and social media companies are facing government scrutiny. Google's not the only one. Obviously, there's a lot going on with Facebook, for example. But I think, and we think, that these algorithm updates are basically Google trying to put its best foot forward to avoid some of the controversies that these companies are having. And another example would be just what happened with the vaccine kind of crisis and the measles epidemics that happened over the last year or two. A lot of this stemmed from misinformation online. So Google is aware of the role that it plays in potentially sending out misinformation into the world, and it's really trying to combat that. So this is just one example of how, you know, information online can have an impact on our daily lives. We also have a situation where 77% of Americans admit to going online to diagnosing their own medical symptoms. So one area where Google's especially turning up the dials on good EAT content is in the medical category, as it tries to reduce misinformation and misdiagnoses and things of that nature. But this is certainly something that's happening across the whole YMYL landscape as Google tries to take out bad actors and kind of prohibit them from spreading misinformation throughout its platform. So this was taken from a meeting that Google had in, I want to say, Switzerland earlier this year, where they said, it was called How Google Fights Disinformation. And they said, we have an important responsibility to our users and to the societies in which we operate to curb the efforts of those who aim to propagate false information on our platform. So this ties right back into the definition of EAT, which I believe is Google's criteria for analyzing the trustworthiness of content and the people who publish it in order to mitigate the spread of misinformation. So this is just one aspect of EAT, kind of the fight against misinformation. But on the flip side, you can think of EAT as a way of increasing the visibility of high quality and trustworthy information online, particularly as it relates to that YMYL, your money, your life content. So what my team and I have been doing is doing a lot of analysis around websites that are seeing performance increases and websites that are seeing declines, and trying to get an understanding of why that's taking place. So a lot of the times people ask us, well, how do you know what Google considers to be high quality content? So Google has, as I mentioned before, what's called the Search Quality Rater Guidelines. It's a publicly available document. If you want to search for it, it's right there on Google as a PDF. 167 pages, and what it's intended to do is Google gives this document to its team of human evaluators that it employs about 10,000 of every year to do manual checks of Google's algorithm. So the way that this works is that Google gives them a document. It explains in detail what it means to have good EAT and good quality content. And on the flip side, what it means to have potentially bad content, you know, misinformation, dangerous content, anything like that. And then the human evaluators then look at a series of pages and they grade them in terms of good EAT, bad EAT, you know, good content, bad content. And Google takes that data and they factor it back into their algorithm to kind of train the machines to emulate that human behavior. So we have this document printed out here at Path Interactive. We use it when we're analyzing website performance because it's really important to understand how Google defines good EAT and good quality content. So in terms of how this document actually works, as I mentioned before, it's not a direct impact on the algorithm because it's human beings that are actually going through this document and grading pages, but those grades and those signals factor back into Google's algorithm. So Google's looking for signals on a web page that correlate with good trustworthiness and authoritativeness. One example is a patent that Google owns called PageRank, which is the way that companies and websites are linked to one another through links. So when they see that a very high quality trusted publication, like let's say the New York Times or maybe harvard.edu or something along those lines, if they're linking to your publication, that's actually going to make Google trust your website more. So it's always a good practice to try to get links from other trustworthy websites whenever you can. And again, search rater data is not used directly in our ranking algorithm, so it's just keep in mind it's not like somebody's going out there and saying this website doesn't look good, and then the next day use those organic traffic. The way that they use this data is the way that a restaurant might get feedback cards from diners. The feedback helps us know if our systems seem to be working. So it's more of a human spot check on the actual algorithm. So what does it mean to have good EAT? Now we'll dive into what Google actually says throughout the documentation. And I want to call out some very important things to keep in mind as you're kind of going through your own websites and considering your own EAT. So the first thing they talk about is authorship. And Google says the reputation and the EAT of the creators of the main content is extremely important when a website has different authors or content creators on different pages. So it asks the quality raters to research the reputation and the EAT, both of the website and the creators of the main content. So this is important because what they're saying is it's not just a matter of looking at the website and seeing how trustworthy the website or the company is. They actually task the human evaluators with looking at the individuals who are publishing content on that website. So you can theoretically, if you're a quality rater working for Google, you might actually go to Google, type that person's name, see what else they've written before, see what their reputation is. And if there's a situation where that individual has a really bad reputation and is known for providing bad advice, for example, that might actually bring down the overall EAT of your website. So the recommendation is to just disclose who your authors are whenever possible and explain why they should be trusted. You know, include bios for them, show any accolades or awards that they've won, maybe link to some other publications that they've done, and that's going to improve your EAT. Another thing to keep in mind is there's a lot of talk in the quality guidelines about advertisements. So Google says we expect advertisements to be visible. However, pages with ads or features that distract from or interrupt the use of the main content should be given a low quality rating. So this is generally reserved for websites that have a lot of ads and that make money off of ads, like news publisher websites, for example. So this isn't necessarily relevant for every type of website, but it speaks to a larger agenda of Google's, which is to make sure that users are having a good experience on that website and that they don't feel like they're being distracted or deceived by companies trying to sell them something. So this also applies to interstitial pop-ups, for example. If you have a pop-up on your website that's distracting users from accessing the main content very easily, that's something that can kind of count against your perceived EAT. Google also talks about external reviews. So they tell the quality raters to use the reputation research to find out what real users as well as real experts think about this website. So you should look at reviews, references, recommendations by experts, news articles, and other credible information. So they get into specifics about how the raters should actually do this. And they say, you know, look at their BBB page, look at their Yelp reviews, look at any other place that they might have reviews or recommendations online. And you're not going to necessarily see a bad SEO performance if you have a 3-star Yelp review, for example. But in aggregate, if there's a trend where people can't seem to trust your brand, if there's a lot of people saying this is a scam, or I didn't get my product, or I had trouble getting in touch with the customer service team, anything along those lines can potentially overall have an impact on your perceived EAT. And as the algorithms try to mimic what human beings were saying about your website, there's a chance that can kind of decrease your SEO visibility. So related to that is trust issues. Google says when there's a disagreement between what the website says about itself and what reputable independent sources say about the website, we'll trust the independent sources. So that's been a big push for Google recently, is they don't just want to see you saying how great you are, they want to see third parties also confirming that you're a great company to work with. So this is why it's important to engage in things like reputation management, try to build up reviews across various platforms, and obviously good PR is always going to help. Another thing Google talks about is your About Us page. So this is a nice kind of easy opportunity for any websites that don't currently have an About Us page. It's a very good idea to just implement one of those. Talk about who your company is, why you should be trusted, how long you've been in business, any awards or accolades that you've won. You could potentially mention who's on your leadership team. All of these things help to instill trust within your users, and it's going to reflect in better SEO performance as people feel that they have a better understanding of who your company is and that they feel good about doing business with you. Another thing Google mentions is user-generated content. So this would be if you have something like comments or a forum on your website. They'll say that we'll consider a comment or forum discussion to be spammed if there are posts with unrelated comments that are not intended to help other users, but rather to advertise a product or create a link to a website. So you might have seen situations where a particular blog page or article allows for people to leave comments on the bottom, and maybe those comments become spam because somebody's trying to sell a product, maybe they're cursing too much, maybe they're saying something inappropriate. That can all bring down the quality of your page. So if you do allow for any comments on your articles, be sure to heavily moderate them. And if you're not in a position where you can moderate them, then I would recommend just removing that functionality. So moving on to a few examples of stellar EAT. First of all, we have a company called Healthline. They are currently the largest market shareholder in the health category as far as SEO goes, and that's a new development. As of several months ago, they surpassed WebMD. So what Healthline's doing is they're the poster child for great EAT. If you've ever wanted to look at a website that's doing it well, I encourage you to look at Healthline. But one thing they do quite well is they differentiate between their ad content and their non-sponsored content. And they tell the user very clearly, you know, we choose the ads that we place on our website. We don't endorse any products. We don't accept certain types of ads. We clearly distinguish ads from the main content. And if they have a co-branded program, they make that very clear to the user. So maybe 5 years ago, you know, a lot of webmasters would try to sneak in sponsored content or content that was advertised in some capacity. Google's cracking down on that, and they really want you to be transparent with your users and say, you know, I accepted a product that I'm, you know, on behalf of providing this review on the website, or I accepted some financial compensation. So just being as transparent as possible. The College Investor site is another example of a site with good EAT. So some examples of what it's doing: it has a last updated on notification, which indicates to the user that it's being frequently updated. And this is certainly important for YMYL websites to show that you're keeping your content up to date. The content itself is detailed and thorough. They also include jump links to be able to easily navigate around the content. So that's more of a user experience initiative, but it definitely helps users to feel good about, okay, it's really easy to use this content, so I'm having a better experience with it. They link to other expert pages, and they also include author bios. So just more about, you know, who are the experts that are working with us and why should they be trusted. The Recovery Village is a drug rehab clinic that has a really fantastic editorial team page. So on this page, they have a very clear policy about, you know, what their editorial policy looks like, how do they fact check their content, and then they go on to list 100 different authors who work at that company, and they include their biographies, links to their LinkedIn profiles, and any other associated websites that they have. So when you're reading this page, you feel really good about who's providing you the content and why you should be able to trust their expert opinion. And lastly, we have an example of a financial institution, which one thing to mention is it has a secure website, so that would be HTTPS. Definitely for SEO nowadays and for your users, it's very important to have HTTPS. If you don't have that, it's also known as an SSL certificate, so if you don't have that currently, definitely talk to your web developers about implementing that. It's easy to understand and navigate this website. The privacy policy is easy to access. And then we have those trust signals, like, you know, mentioned on Forbes and the SNL Financial on their homepage. All of these things work in tandem to kind of improve the perceived EAT of your website. So some takeaways. Financial companies have to be thinking about, you know, the information that they proliferate online, ensuring that it showcases expertise, authoritativeness, or trustworthiness, also known as EAT. And so 6 takeaways for good EAT. First and foremost, your money, your life content should be evidence-based, objective, thorough, and heavily researched. If you ever don't know what that means from Google's standpoint, the easiest way to do it is to take whatever article you're writing about or whatever keyword you'd like to rank for and just Google it and see what the other top rankers are saying and make sure that your content is in line with the recommendations that those companies are providing. You'll also want to include high-quality citations in your content and support statements with facts from trusted resources. So don't be shy about referencing the companies or the websites where you're getting your information from. it actually is a good signal for SEO purposes to cite your sources the way that you might have a bibliography in a term paper or something along those lines. And just make sure that whoever you're linking to is also a trusted publication that Google would feel good about pulling information from that company as well. Number 3 would be to disclose who your brand is, who your authors are, and why they should be trusted. You shouldn't just say that we have these authors. You have to also give proof that they're real experts. And in a situation where maybe you don't have real experts that are writing your content, see if it's possible to have expert reviewers kind of giving you that seal of approval and attaching their name to the content. Improving your online reputation and reviews on third-party websites is always a good exercise. There's a lot of ways to manage your reputation online, and so that's just something we would always recommend doing. And then avoiding affiliate links or salesy language in YMYL content. So what this means is if you're providing financial advice on a page, you have to be really careful about trying to sell something throughout that content. Google doesn't want to see biased or salesy content on articles that are supposed to be purely informative. There's a place to be salesy and transactional, but when you're providing that advice, you have to be really careful about not trying to convince that user or that reader to buy your product right then and there. Google's definitely been cracking down on that. And then lastly, just maintain an editorial policy and disclosures around any advertisements that you have. The more transparent you can be, the better. So consider having some links maybe in the footer of your website that explain what does the process look like for content to be published on your site, who's reading it, and what editorial standards do you have as a business, just to make sure that users know that they're reading great, trustworthy content. So with that, I think we can move into questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave and Lily. We have a few questions. The first one is, to see if our website was affected by the Google update, how do we track those SEO metrics and traffic?
Sure. So generally, the best place to look would be Google Analytics or whatever other analytics platform you're using to monitor organic traffic. If you wake up one morning and you see that 60% of your organic traffic is gone, something along those lines, it can actually be even more than that in some cases. I would recommend that you just go to Google and say, was there a Google algorithm update today? Because my industry, we're very, very quick to publish about that. There's probably about 3 to 4 big ones per year, and then there's some aftershocks that happen in between them. So use your analytics, and then there's also some SEO tools such as SEMrush, Moz, some other places that you can go if you subscribe to those tools. That'll show you pretty much the day after they take place if you've lost a lot of organic visibility.
Great, thank you. Another question is, our blog and articles are created by a third-party individual, a copywriter. Will this hurt our site since we don't include an author line or author bio?
So that's a very common question. What I would recommend doing is, if that person writes for you frequently, I would still recommend creating an author bio for them and try to, increase their EAT as much as possible by maybe having them take courses or just developing an expertise in the subject matter. And then on top of that, it's always a best practice to loop in a real expert. So you can have the copywriter write the content, but then you can indicate on the page, this content has been reviewed by this real expert, put their names, and then put maybe a link to a page that explains who they are and why they should be trusted.
Great, thank you. Another question is, what is the best way of generating positive reviews?
So depending on what platform you'd like to generate reviews on, there's a lot of different tactics that you can use. After you've had a transaction with a customer, a lot of the times within the email, you might say something like, if you've had a good experience with us, please leave us a review on these different platforms. And then you could link to the one that you really want to focus on, whether it be Trustpilot or Google My Business or anything like that. And there's a lot of best practices if you look into this, like how to, capture a customer when they're still feeling really good about your business and using that opportunity to kind of say, hey, I'm really happy that we had a nice exchange together. Maybe you just finished a live chat or a phone conversation, and to encourage them to go onto your desired platform and to leave a good review.
Thank you. And the last question is, one of your examples mentions having a social media presence. For a brand with a smaller footprint, do you still recommend having a social media account?
Yes, I would recommend that every legitimate company sets up social media profiles, even if you don't necessarily intend to use those profiles. For example, a lot of companies might not want to use Facebook because they might not think that that's in line with their brand, and that's okay. But what Google is looking for is it wants to see every possible signal that you're a serious business. So at this point, most serious businesses have all the different social media accounts kind of registered under their name. And then they draw connections too. So they say, you know, I see this company, I know that they're the same company that I see on LinkedIn and on Twitter, on Facebook. And so clearly they're investing into their brand and to communicating with the public. So at the very least, get those profiles set up, put your information on there, and then how you use them is kind of up to you.
Thank you. And if any of the audience wants to ask a question, you can just use the chat button. We'll give you a few minutes if there's any last-minute questions. Thank you so much, Dave and Lily, for sharing your expertise with us. Remember, the slides and recording of today's webinar will be available on AFSA's website under Webinar Resource Center. Thank you so much, everyone. This concludes today's presentation.